Hi, welcome. It's Martha from Our Brain Bank, and today we have a really special guest for our Voices chat. This is Dr. Courtney Burnett. She's a doctor and also a brain tumor patient, living with a brain tumor. So I'll let her introduce herself, and I'm going to switch over the hosting to you, Courtney.
Great. Thank you, Martha.
There you go.
Give me just a minute and I'll share my slide with you. All right, you guys able to see my screen? Perfect. Well, so as Martha said, I'll keep this brief. I just want to introduce myself and tell a little bit about my story and why I'm here. So my name's Courtney. I'm a 29-year-old physician. I live and work in Minnesota, and I also have brain cancer, as Martha said. I know this is a talk for glioblastoma patients, and so I'll start off by saying that I don't have technically glioblastoma. I have a very murky diagnosis, and I'm going to get more into the details as I share my story with you. But I have what started as grade 2 earlier this winter, which progressed rapidly to grade 3 with concern for secondary glioblastoma. So I am living and being treated as if I have a glioblastoma, although it's a little bit unclear, but I can relate to you and what you're going through as far as GBM treatment. So I want to thank Martha again and the entire Our Brain Bank team for asking me to speak today. I want to keep this really informal and kind of interactive. Although I'm a physician, I am not a neuro-oncologist or any type of cancer specialist. So like many of you, I have had to learn a whole new world of information that I didn't expect to. And I don't know that I have any incredible words of wisdom to share with you today, but I've found that we are all simply a lot stronger when we fight cancer together. So today I just want to start a conversation, say hi, share my story, and hope that maybe some of my story will help you guys who are all fighting a similar fight. On the day of my brain cancer diagnosis this past February, I started a blog that gained a really unexpected following over the world. And so really I'm a writer more than a speaker, and I love words, but I also think pictures share a better story. So I'm going to share some of my story with pictures today, as well as snippets and segments from my blog and my upcoming book. Feel free to jump in anytime if you have questions. First, I want to take you way back. So I grew up near Minneapolis, Minnesota, and my medical journey personally started many years ago when I decided I wanted to be a doctor and go to medical school. I first went to the University of Minnesota for my undergraduate degree, where I majored in genetics, ironically doing my honors thesis work in cancer genetics research. I then moved to Chicago for a time when I went to Northwestern University for medical school and graduated from the Feinberg School of Medicine back in 2017. I then moved back to my home state of Minnesota, where I completed my internal medicine residency just this past June. And now I'm spending my time working as a chief resident. So that's where I am today, in an office at a hospital in the Twin Cities, where I essentially work as a teacher and advocate for med students and residents in the program. This past winter, however, during my third and final year of residency, I was diagnosed with brain cancer. To understand my journey, let's take a virtual trip today. So here are some photos back from this January when I went to Chiang Mai, Thailand, where I planned to spend 6 weeks studying at a large urban hospital. I've always been really interested in Eastern and complementary medicine, so I love the idea of visiting Thailand to work in a traditional and complementary medicine clinic. Here I plan to learn Thai massage, acupuncture, and other more traditional Eastern-based medical philosophies to supplement my knowledge of Western medical practices. As I mentioned, I practice internal medicine, but I believe that a good physician is a very well-rounded physician. I think science and evidence-based medicine are key, but I feel that there's a lot more to the field of medicine than science can really fully explain. Medicine involves so much and involves humanity, birth, death, relationships, suffering, cultural awareness, religion, spirituality, beliefs, etc. I mean, you name it. Medicine is a big picture, and we can't explain it all by science. And so I went to Thailand to learn how to incorporate all of these aspects of medicine into my own practice. I had initially planned to spend my month working in this Thai complementary medicine clinic, but ironically, it was closed the first week of my visit, and so I was reassigned to actually work on a cancer service and a palliative medicine service while I was in Thailand for the first few weeks. Finally, after doing these services for a few weeks, it was time for me to start in a complementary medicine clinic availability. Sorry, got distracted for a minute. Okay, so when I was finally ready to go into this complementary medicine clinic, I woke up, unfortunately, feeling like I was coming down with a cold. This was pre-COVID pandemic, so I did take some ibuprofen, put on a mask, and walked into clinic. Physicians sometimes make terrible patients, so looking back, shouldn't have done this, but I did. I went into work. It was a beautiful sunny day in Chiang Mai, and I started to feel better on my way into the clinic. I arrived to the Chinese medicine department, where a physician asked if I would be interested in trying acupuncture myself. I had never tried this before, and so I happily agreed, lying down on a table. But as I lay down with needles covering my neck and back, I started to feel feverish and incredibly ill. I was upset at myself and my body for essentially failing me during this interesting experience. And so I reluctantly decided to take the afternoon off of work. I crawled back into bed, and suddenly, during this high fever, I felt my left hand muscles start to contract incredibly rapidly. I'd never experienced anything like this before. Next, I felt my throat muscles squeezing shut. This was super odd. I'd never experienced it before. I couldn't explain it. Took some more ibuprofen and went to bed. I woke up the next day, went to work, and walked to a small local market on my way home to find a few souvenirs for my family. As I stood outside in the open air market, I felt that same awful muscle cramping start again out of nowhere. I stepped out of the tent I was in, and I hid myself between two vendor stalls as I prepared for what I knew was coming next. My left hand again started to contract really rapidly. My fingers were squeezing together, almost like I had no control over them. And then my throat started closing. This time, disgusting saliva was pooling in my mouth, and I felt drool dripping down my chin. I had no idea what was going on, but in 30 seconds, this was back to normal. I stood there trying to medically rationalize what had happened to me. In my mind, I thought this could be an electrolyte imbalance, a strange infection, dehydration, maybe just anxiety. I also thought, this could be a partial seizure, but why? I was a 29-year-old woman. I was healthy. I had never had a seizure before. I tried to just brush off these symptoms and decided I'd worry if they happened again. Well, they did. They happened about 5 or 6 more times over the next week, always in that same pattern, left hand contracting and then throat contracting where I couldn't swallow for about 30 to 60 seconds. I would soon realize that these were my body's one and only symptom of brain cancer, these focal seizures. Literally a week prior to this, I'd been out working at an elephant sanctuary without a care in the world. I had no other symptoms, no headaches, nausea, vomiting, no weight loss, no fatigue. I actually felt great. I was probably in the best shape of my life. When my most terrifying focal seizure occurred a few days later, it was late in the evening in Thailand. The emergency medical system works very differently there, and I was not excited about the prospect of spending the rest of the night standing in an emergency triage center where I couldn't talk about my symptoms in the Thai language. Instead, I called one of my emergency contacts at the Chiang Mai hospital, a physician I had worked with, who very fortunately happened to be a neurologist. I described my symptoms to her on the phone late that night, feeling like a fool, bothering her for what was likely anxiety or nothing to worry about. But I tried to explain my symptoms as a physician would, consulting another physician on an unusual case, and this strategy worked. The doctor agreed with me, and she told me to meet her the following morning where she would walk me to the neurology clinic in Thailand. The next morning, I sat alone in a busy waiting room, looking around to see hundreds of eyes staring at me, a lone foreigner in the middle of the room. While waiting, I planned out the story I would tell the neurologist. If this clinic worked in a similar way to the oncology clinic I had been working on the previous week, I knew I would have about 2 to 5 minutes to explain my symptoms and convince the physician that these were real and not the anxious manifestations of a very young hypochondriac. I would then advocate to get myself an MRI. An hour later, palms sweating and voice shaking, my name was finally called. I walked into the clinic room, shared with a second patient and her physician, and introduced myself to the doctor. Here I was, both patient and physician for the very first time in my life. I was unsure of my identity and unsure of how to act. I told the doctor my story. I told him I was a physician, and I said I knew that these symptoms could be a figment of my anxious imagination, but I was confident that I had enough signs pointing to seizures that I required an urgent MRI. The neurologist looked strangely at me, not really quite sure what to make of a young, bossy American physician or patient sitting in front of him asking for a specific workup. I thought I must be crazy. The neurologist then had me do a brief exam, an exam I was actually quite familiar with myself and had done on many patients before. As the exam progressed, his expression changed. We realized together that my left hand displayed some subtle weakness compared to my right. My shocked eyes looked into his, and he agreed. We needed an MRI. these could be seizures. A nurse took me back to the MRI room, gave me a gown to change into, and asked me to sign a financial agreement. In Thailand, medical payments work much differently than in the US. Medical quotes are all predetermined. Patients are asked to sign agreements before their procedure, test, or treatment even begins. I signed a bill agreeing to pay 8,000 Thai baht, about $250 US, for my MRI, and I lay down on the table, stuffed into a cramped and outdated MRI machine. Compared to MRIs at home, as many of you have likely experienced, this one was large and frightening. I didn't receive headphones playing relaxing music to lull me to sleep, and I wasn't offered medication to curb claustrophobia. Instead, the radiology technician played very intense Thai pop dance music and left the room. I lay there in the MRI machine, deciding I must be losing my mind. These have to be panic attacks, I told myself, only to start feeling my left hand tighten and my throat muscles contracting again. I lay in the MRI scanner for 45 minutes before the MRI tech re-entered the room. Expecting him to say I was finished, I was shocked when he instead asked me to sign a second financial agreement while laying in the MRI machine. In limited English, he said, "Is it okay if I charge you another 8,000 Thai baht for your surgical planning scan now?" Excuse me? A surgical planning scan? Sir, I told him I'm a physician, and I assume this means that you found something on the first scan if you're needing a surgical planning scan now. Yes, was all he said. Keeping my questions brief due to our language barrier, I asked him, "Well, how many masses did you see? One or multiple?" "One mass," was all he said. I agreed to pay the money, signed the form, and spent the longest 20 minutes of my life creating an updated differential diagnosis in my mind. Differential diagnosis for one brain mass leading to recurrent focal seizures. Brain abscess was what came to my mind, or a focal pocket of infection. I had spent days playing with beautiful but dirty elephants. I'd even hopped in the stream to bathe them at one point and figured I must have caught an infection, thinking how could I have been so careless. Next on my list was a camera smudge. I was lying in an outdated MRI machine. This must simply be a technical glitch, I figured. The inner patient in me did not want to consider the last possibility on my list, but the inner physician in me knew I must. A brain tumor. One mass and one life-changing realization. As my scan ended, I realized the neurologist I'd met earlier that day had told me he would not have time to read my scan until the next morning. But with a brain tumor or an infection on my differential, I knew that this would not do. I got off of the MRI table and I walked into the technologist command center, feeling terrified, yet confident that I needed the greatest bravery of my life. I told him, as I mentioned, I'm a doctor and I need to see my scan results and take a few pictures. Being the only doctor in the entire imaging center, he agreed, let me into his room. On the screen in front of me, as you can see here, I saw an enormous, golf ball-sized, irregularly shaped mass in my right frontal lobe. This mass was huge, so huge that it caused some mass effect, a medical term meaning it squished some of my healthy brain tissue towards the left side of my brain, which was why I was having these focal seizures. As I numbly and terrifyingly snapped a few photos with my cell phone, I tried to process what I was seeing on the screen in front of me. My first thought was, shoot, I'm going to have to tell this patient some terrible news today. She has a massive brain tumor. The radiology tech said, "All right, that's enough time," and kicked me out of the room. "The radiologist will call you with the results tomorrow." Speechless, I walked out of the clinic. There I was, standing alone on a sidewalk in Chiang Mai, Thailand, trying to process what I had just seen on my own scan. The physician in me knew this was either a tumor or, less likely, an infection, both of which are considered medical emergencies and need prompt evaluation. Outside of the imaging center, I realized I needed to be admitted to the hospital, like right now. I didn't want to be standing alone on the sidewalk in Chiang Mai waiting for a grand mal seizure to come around and kill me. So I texted a picture of my brain scan to the doctor I'd seen that morning and asked to be directly admitted to the hospital in Thailand. Here are some pictures. As you can see, later that afternoon, I found myself a patient at the same hospital I'd been working in just days before. I was a patient in Thailand for 3 nights. Although the medical care system works quite differently in Thailand than in America, many of the very basic logistical and scheduling aspects of my hospital stay were familiar to me. I knew that the physician would order some labs and vital sign checks, so I was prepared when the lab tech came into my room, stuck an IV in me, and took a few vials of blood without saying a single word to me. I was also prepared to be woken up from sleep every few hours for vital signs where they would check my heart rate, blood pressure, and oxygen levels, as you all can likely relate to. Every time a familiar activity happened, I felt grateful. All right, I know what this is. I can feel the blood pressure cuff squeezing my arm. I can read my blood pressure measurement. I know it's okay. When the IV pole was wheeled into my room and some fluids were hung, I thought, okay, this is familiar. I know what this IV fluid is, and I know why a doctor would order this. None of this was explained to me as it was happening, partially because of the language barrier, but more honestly, because none of this is explained well to patients, ever. As a physician, I often make the decision to order labs, place IV lines, start fluids, and do vital sign checks without informing my patients of these things. Of course, I always inform my patients of critical changes or big test results. However, routine tasks like I'm talking about are as commonplace in medicine as sending an email would be in the corporate world. Physicians don't always remember that for patients, an email feels very different than a blood draw or a blood pressure measurement. I absolutely cannot fathom how terrifying it would be to be a patient, let alone a patient in a foreign country, lying alone in a hospital room without understanding any of these procedures or why they happen, when they happen, or what the results mean. The only reason I felt comfortable at all in this situation was that it is literally my day-to-day job. I tell you all of this not because it is how medicine should be or how it always is, or always will be, but because I can't deny how profoundly grateful I felt to understand the situation around me through the eyes of a physician. Being a patient is terrifying. As a patient, your autonomy is gone. You find yourself with millions of unanswered questions, and you spend hours waiting for a physician you just met to tell you the worst news of your life. I hope that I always remember my own hospital admissions with absolute clarity so that I may act as a more compassionate and understanding physician to my own patients. In the end, really one of the best gifts of my global medicine experience was my experience being a patient. Through this, I learned to be a better physician. I realized that knowledge is power and decided that when I was back at work, I would spend more time with my patients, really explaining why all of these things are happening to them. My colleague with me in Thailand made endless calls to our clinic directors back home, and together my advocates in Thailand and in Minnesota arranged for a medical evacuation flight, which would take me directly back to the University of Minnesota, where I work for urgent brain surgery. I woke up in my hospital bed the next day in Thailand, suddenly realizing it was my last day abroad. My journey had come to a very abrupt and unexpected end. Although when I think about it now, my real journey was really only just beginning. My work within the clinic in Thailand had introduced me to an incredible team of palliative care nurses, doctors, and social workers. All of these people were experts in tough conversations about chronic disease, death, and dying. Miss A, who you can see in this picture, was one of the nurses in the palliative care team who became a close friend. Miss A and a group of the other palliative care women visited me in the hospital. They laughed with me, cried with me, ate food with me, and listened to me. Prior to my hospitalization, one of the things I was most excited for in Thailand was something called a monk chat. If any of you have been to Thailand or to some of the Eastern Asian countries, you may have experienced this, but many temples in Thailand advertise times when monks are available to have free and informal chats with visitors. These chats offer a really casual experience where people can ask questions to a monk about anything they feel could be helpful in their own life. I had monk chat written down in my calendar literally every day since I got to Thailand. Unfortunately, I kept postponing this for other fun adventures. In preparation for my eventual monk chat, I had kept an evolving list of questions on my phone. They included, what's one thing worth giving up to relieve yourself of suffering? What's the key to finding peace within yourself? How do you make peace with your decisions, especially the tough ones? And how do you find happiness in a world of endless suffering? Lying in the hospital bed that day in Thailand, I realized that I'd never made it to my monk chat. As I looked at these questions, I started to cry. At that moment, more than ever before, I needed guidance. I needed answers. I needed a way to find peace and happiness to cope with very unexpected suffering. When the palliative care team heroes stopped by again later that afternoon, they asked if there was anything else they could do for me. One common role of a palliative care team, as you may be aware of, is to provide spiritual guidance for patients when requested. In the US, palliative teams often help coordinate with chaplains or priests to administer last rites. In Thailand, there really aren't many priests, but there are many monks. So I asked my palliative care friends for one favor. Can you find a monk to stop by with me and chat with me before I leave? An hour after they left my room, a middle-aged monk in a saffron robe walked into my hospital room with Miss A following closely behind to help interpret. I sat across from the monk and I told him about my brain tumor diagnosis. He listened to my story with hands resting calmly on his lap, smiling the entire time. After I'd finished, the monk spoke in English, summarizing everything I ever needed to know about life in 2 minutes. In these 2 minutes, the monk, whose name I can't remember, said to me, "Be happy." I nodded, really unsure of what to say. "Find time to calm the mind," he went on. I let this sink in. Be happy? Had this monk forgotten I just told him I had a brain tumor? He went on to say, "This happened for a reason. Smile. Do not cry." Hearing this, of course, I burst into tears and smiled foolishly at the same time. Every emotion went through me: fear, happiness, sadness, terror, and joy. The wise monk saw my tears and said, "Do not worry about your illness. Illness and death are a natural part of life." I had never in my life felt the kind of deep inner peace I felt when the monk spoke those 2 brief sentences. Illness and death are a natural part of life. As a physician, I knew this, of course, yet I'd never actually considered this fact of life and that it would also apply to me. I'm young and healthy. Why would I be dying? How foolish, I thought. We're all dying. Death had found me, and I was not prepared for it. The monk was right. How simple, yet how profound. I've had what feels like hundreds of years of schooling, yet nothing in my education was as helpful to me as this monk's brief lesson. As a physician who has seen illness and death more times than I can count, I can tell you without a doubt that there is only one thing medically certain in this life, and that is death. Why fear the inevitable? Why keep quiet about death when every human being in the entire world will experience it? Humans, especially in the West, don't seem to like talking about death. It's as if we think if we ignore death, we can just avoid it. Yet we know deep down this is false. Death will find us eventually. If we are prepared for it, won't it be so much easier to accept? A lot has happened since then, including 2 brain surgeries. First, I had a brain biopsy back in the US, which diagnosed me with grade 2 diffuse astrocytoma. A month later, I had a more intensive craniotomy, trying to remove most of the tumor in my right frontal lobe. At that point, my pathology was upgraded to a grade 3 anaplastic astrocytoma. And like I mentioned, I had another scan very shortly after surgery where I had rapid tumor progression, leading my doctors to have concern for secondary GBM. I don't really know what I have, but at this point, I've received glioblastoma dose radiation and have been on Timdar, as many of you have likely also been on, for 5 cycles of the 523. I start my 6th cycle today. So far, so good. Here's my radiation celebration in the middle of COVID. I lost my hair. Here's what's left of it now, coming back in. I graduated from medical residency. I wrote a book. I lived to see more days, and I found happiness. Sometimes I reflect on my recent experience, and I wonder if all of this happened to allow me to help others in a more meaningful way than I ever dreamed was possible. Through dying, I've learned to live. Through suffering, I have found joy. Through the loss of a guaranteed future that I once envisioned, I have found absolute peace and freedom. I'm really more alive today than I've ever been before. My book is called Difficult Gifts because that is what cancer has been to me. Cancer saved my life in so many ways. Cancer is the most difficult, beautiful, and life-changing gift I've ever received. This difficult gift not only inspired me to write and share my story, it also taught me to be a better, more relatable physician by being a patient as well. Thank you all so much for listening to my story. If I have time, you can ask me questions. Here I've left up all my contact information. Please feel free to email me. Here's a link to my blog where you can find more information about ordering my book or just reading along with the blog. Love all of your support. Thanks.
Thank you, Courtney. That was absolutely amazing. You tell your story. You have such an incredible story and you tell it so beautifully. Although I would have to say, if I had a brain tumor, I'd just been diagnosed myself, and someone said to me, everything happens for a reason, I would have been really mad, you know, and smile. So, you handled that much more gracefully. So welcome everyone who joined. Courtney, if anyone has questions for Courtney, you can write it in the chat, or you can just say it. Remember to unmute yourself before you speak.
Is this a good time just to say it? Can you hear me okay?
I can, yeah.
Dr. Burnett, my name is Elizabeth Petrolia, and my mother is also on the presentation here today. Her name's Barbara Pope, and she is a GBM patient. I'm also an attorney. I do nursing home compliance and deal a lot with violations related to patient rights and things of that nature. So I see this from a multifaceted perspective, kind of like you do as both a physician and a patient. I am terribly impressed by your story and how you enveloped advocating for yourself. As a daughter, it's challenging to temper my emotions and still be a good advocate. I was hoping you could comment on how to do that, to be, because I'm sure that's a daily thing in your healthcare, on good strategies for how to be a good advocate for yourself, as well as from a caregiver perspective, to communicate effectively with your doctor on what you think your needs are. Because at this point, you know, we're over a year out, and we are quite knowledgeable at this point and are empowered with significant knowledge to advocate for ourselves. But I would appreciate any strategies that you can suggest for being a productive advocate.
Absolutely, that's a fantastic question, and I'm glad that you asked it. I think it's different for every patient, but I think it sounds like you're already doing the right things. I mean, a big piece of it is educating yourself, and I try to do this, as I said, with my own diagnosis, because oncology was a whole new world for me, but also with patients I see who are diagnosed with other things. I think it's always incredibly helpful, more helpful than you can know, if as a patient you bring in your questions, you know, written down or somehow thought about in advance to your doctor. As doctors, a big issue, of course, as you are all well aware of, is time. There's simply not enough time, especially the way our healthcare system works, to really spend the amount of time that would be most helpful with every patient, every visit. And so if you are educating yourself by, you know, being parts of these conversations, joining cancer advocacy groups, writing down when you have questions, writing down if you have new symptoms so that you just come prepared for that information. I think that's one of the best things you can do. Especially I found, you know, even myself, even though I'm in this situation and in the medical world every day, it's still hard for me to remember everything I want to bring up with my own doctor when I have an appointment, because, you know, emotions come into play, you're stressed, it's always a scary experience. So having things written down, sort of like I kept, you know, a list of the questions I wanted to ask this monk in Thailand. I have the ongoing phone list of questions all the time. I also think that these groups, you know, Our Brain Bank is wonderful, some of the brain cancer groups on Facebook, just educating yourself and not being scared to share what you've learned with your physician is important. A physician should never look down on you for saying, you know, I saw this clinical trial, I saw this information, can you tell me more about it? They should be excited to talk with you more about that. And so I absolutely say you should take your own information and your own questions and bring it to your doctor. I hope that helps.
That's a really good point, Courtney, because I think sometimes doctors are, they tell you, I think a lot of doctors will say, don't Google this. They'll just say that. That's the first thing they say after the diagnosis. So it's just very refreshing to hear you say that.
You're going to Google it anyways. I mean, I would just say if you're Googling, you know, try and find good sources, find sources that have worked for other physicians, or ask your doctor. Instead of Googling, is there another source that would maybe have better information that I could get my questions from? And I think any doctor would be happy to do that for you.
Any good doctor, that's great. And then, so Courtney, since I know you're really interested in Eastern medicine and supplemental and alternative, can you just talk, if you're comfortable, talk a little bit about what you actually think helps with quality of life? Obviously, that's undisputed, but do you, I don't know if you want to get into it, but, you know, or do you see any alternatives in terms of actually having medical benefits?
That's a great question. I have to say, first, my answer as a doctor is that there's just not enough data to confirm that any of the sort of alternative treatments are, you know, are are helping, at least in terms of outcomes. There's just not enough data, at least in the US, which is unfortunate, but I think more is coming. As a patient, my answer is different. I think that if an alternative treatment makes you feel better, then it's working. That's what it's intended to do. You know, call it a placebo, call it whatever you want. If you're going to feel more energy, feel more happiness, get more sleep because of an alternative treatment, I think that's great. Things I will say, and I guess I should clarify a little bit more what I mean by alternative treatments, because I think that there is a lot of misinformation about drugs and supplements that people start taking that I don't advocate for. I don't want people to willy-nilly just take a supplement that they hear about on a brain cancer group. That can be dangerous. But I do think things that are, you know, non-medical based, things like acupuncture, massage, you know, meditation and mindfulness, those things are fantastic and have almost zero side effects. So I absolutely advocate for those. I think when you are, you know, there's not to say that there's something wrong with supplements, with alternative diets, with other medications and strategies that people are trying. But I will just say that if you're going to do that, I think super important that you tell your physician that you're doing that, and that you just do it in a smart way that works with the treatment you're on.
Right, because I know one of our medical advisors, I asked him about medical marijuana, and he said he was very clear that if you do that during treatment, depending on what stage, you know, that can actually be quite harmful. So even if it's not legal in your state or whatever, you know, you just have to communicate with your doctor.
Exactly. I think communicating with the doctor is the most important because, you know, medical marijuana, again, is something that there are small studies on as far as how it can be helpful. We've seen that medical marijuana can be helpful in some chronic pains, for some types of insomnia and things. There are small studies that suggest that it may help in brain cancer, but we truly just don't have enough research or evidence for, I think, an oncologist to confidently say that this is a standard of care treatment by any means. But I do think if it's something you're interested in, just be very open with your own oncologist about that. Again, advocate for yourself if that's something that you want to try. And why it's important to be upfront about that is that your doctor will likely order additional labs, more monitoring, just to make sure that if you do choose to do something like medical marijuana, that it's not impacting your other treatments.
I also wanted to ask a question about sugar because for me, when I was first diagnosed, I was thinking, okay, I heard about the keto diet, and I thought, okay, I'm going to do that because all my life I've loved my sugar. I mean, I'm being honest, I love sugar. And I did stop, initially, and I lost a lot of weight fast. I was like, oh my gosh, wow. And then I decided, with all the procedures and stuff, I thought, I'm throwing it in. My birthday came up and I was like, my kids' birthdays came up and I'm like, I want sugar. I'm curious about your thoughts about that. Do you think that that's opening up something? Let's just curious about that in particular.
I think that's a fantastic question. Actually, something that as a patient, I've been doing a lot of research into and wondering about. I think like a lot of these other sort of alternative medications and treatments, there's just simply not enough data. Part of that is we can't, scientists can't randomize people to studies where they say you're only going to eat this, you're only going to eat this for 10 years and did it help or not? It's just no one would do that study. So I think we just don't have enough to confirm it. What I can say from a medical perspective is that there are some trials and there's some evidence that yes, high sugar, especially processed food sugar, not fake sugar, but sugars in very processed foods contribute to some inflammation in the body. That's a theory. I can't say that I am not a clinical dietitian and I don't know that I have enough medical evidence to say this in a meaningful way. But I think that there is some evidence that suggests too much sugar, of course, is a bad thing, but I think that can be said about anything, right? Too much of any unhealthy food is a bad thing. So I've played around with the keto diet like you, Hannah. I tried it just to see, would this make me feel better? Because, if I could eat something different and have more energy, sleep better, I thought, why not? But also like you, I love sugar and I love good food. And if my life is limited, I'm not giving up pasta for anything. And so I think there's something to be said about, eat what makes you feel better and eat healthy food. among all of medicine, the healthiest diets that have been found are the Mediterranean diets, which do include some carbohydrates. So I don't want to say that there's any evidence to support cutting out sugar or cutting out carbs completely. There's not enough evidence to say that. I would say eat healthy, eat what makes you feel good. And if some of that is carbs, then by all means, enjoy the birthday cake.
Absolutely. Thank you. One other thing I was going to ask you, but I'll wait till it comes back to me because I can see if someone else has a question.
Well, I'm just going to jump in now. I think most everyone on the call is familiar with our Brain Bank. We're a nonprofit devoted to moving glioblastoma from terminal to treatable, powered by patients. And our key tool is our app. You use our free app and you use it to track symptoms and health indicators. And then that same data is used by researchers to gain insights. And we are, that was a pilot study we did with that. That was about almost 3 years ago. And we're looking to improve and expand and enlarge our studies. And actually, this is good today, Courtney, because you're making me think, we're thinking about what data do researchers want? And maybe the data people using these alternative or supplemental treatments, maybe over long term, no one's doing a clinical study with Rick Simpson oil as far as I know, but maybe if that data shows it, so maybe that's an interesting thing to track long term. So if you're not familiar with Our Brain Bank, just go to our website, OurBrainBank.org, and you can read all about it.
I have another thing I wanted to ask is about blood type. Interestingly, well before this whole thing happened, I grew up to be a hypochondriac. I actually was a hypochondriac. I'm just wondering if I knew when I was going to come into this life, because I also believe in reincarnation and all that stuff. Why did I know that this was going to hit me? And it's interesting because my mother was O negative, right? And I was the youngest of 3 and I'm O negative. My son's O negative. I had to get the RH thing. Knock wood, people that are O blood type are considered the oldest blood type, right? That's considered the oldest blood type. But guess what? We're also, and I thought that more cancers came to the A blood types and the AB and things. And then I'm thinking with this to do, obviously the O blood type is ain't gonna stop that shit. Sorry, I'm sorry I'm being silly, but it doesn't stop that, I guess. Any thoughts on that?
That's an interesting question. I've seen that question come up in some brain cancer groups as well. I'll be honest, I don't think that I have not seen any data that would convince me to think that there's a connection between blood type and cancer. That's not to say that there isn't, and it's just, some science that we don't have answers to is just science that has not been studied yet, or where answers are coming down the road. So I can't say that there's not, but I can say in my own experience in medicine, I haven't seen anything to really support that theory in a way that would, make me say that to a patient.
Okay.
A great question.
I think, Hannah, also you have interesting, if you want to talk about it, that you have GBM in your family, which is, I think, unusual.
Yeah, so my whole journey is so unusual. I had a first cousin, Gail, my aunt's daughter, who in 2006 had this. And it was on both sides of her brain, and they couldn't do anything for her. And it was so sad. But her attitude was amazing. And I was like, oh my gosh, she's smiling. And I remember thinking, oh my God, really? That surprised me, because also I lost my mother. I lost my mother at 67. Now I was 28 and my dad at 72. So I had 2 hemorrhagic strokes, both of them on the 17th of different months and years. Okay. So there was that scenario. Then Gail had this situation happening. And I remember giving her lots of love, and just being I can't believe how happy. And, she was just this beautiful woman, beautiful. She was like a psychologist. She did pass. They couldn't do anything. 2012, my brother had the glioblastoma. And, my son was getting bar mitzvahed, and my brother told me, oh my gosh, they found this thing in my brain. And the surgery for him, he was over 6 feet tall. He had 2 young little kids. The guy who did the surgery at Jefferson did not do such a great job. He had to be catheterized. He was over 6 feet tall. His wife couldn't take care of him in the house. And then she put him in a facility. And then he kept saying, I just want to go home. I just want to go home. And my heart was broken for him. I really was. And I thought, I want to put him in my house. So when I was diagnosed, and I had a weird feeling like this was going to happen to me. Like in 2012, I remember going to visit him, and I remember driving down by myself and sitting by myself. And it keeps coming back to me, like this feeling of horror, like, oh my God, like I almost kind of thought it was going to happen to me. But here it didn't happen to me until 2019. And then I also, part of me said, I want to go to Portland, Oregon, and I'm going to say goodbye to everybody I love, and just shoot me up. I'll say goodbye. And I know I'm going to live again, because I do believe that my soul is living forever. And I do believe that I have comfort. It does give me comfort. Like you were having all those beautiful quotes that I had to take the pictures of, because I love it so much, and it gives me such peace. Thank you for sharing that. And so also my scenario of when mine was caught, my whole journey, I had like this strange thing where it was just around Thanksgiving, and I took a nap. All of a sudden I got, and oh my God, I had aphasia for like a half an hour. So they found it fast. They did the CT scan. They saw a lesion. It had bled. I always thought to myself, I'm either going to die of a hemorrhagic stroke or I'm going to have this thing. And long story short, I also had a lot of pressure with my work scenarios that were never aligned. Like you sound like you love to be a doctor, and this is your alignment. But me, I was a marketing major, and that's my only little psychology that I brought into the business world, because that's really what I should have been, was a social worker or a therapist. And I wound up going in that thing, working for a bunch of narcissists, and I was miserable. And I went to someone who said to me, this is a strange scenario, because she put me on a hypnosis to go back to some past lives. She said, I think we all have so much more power than we realize, and that I almost, in some cockamamie way, actually created this. And I'm thinking to myself, why would I have chosen something this horrific? But I'm telling you what, there are blessings that I'm having in my life right now, because I'm being, people aren't saying to me, what are you doing? And I'm saying, you know what? I'm just being. And I'm also spreading my love and light for others. So I'm also open to love and light, and I'm doing a lot of meditations, and I've got this woman, Kelly, who has Archangel Raphael, and, I'm doing all kinds of cool things that are just helping in that thing. So whatever's going to be, none of us know our future. We have memories of our past. And the one thing that makes me sort of sane in getting through this is to be in the present moment. The sun is shining today, right? The beautiful wind is blowing. You're a beautiful soul to meet. I'm so grateful to have met you. Thank you. Even though I feel a little sad for all of us, but I feel gratitude.
Thank you so much, Hannah. It's really wonderful to hear your story too. And I'm sorry to hear you've had so many family members affected with this, but fully support what you're saying. All we can do is live in the present, enjoy the sun, or if you're in Minnesota, the snow today.
She lives in Alistair, by the way, and she also lived there for 2 years for the VA, and she's actually home with me now.
Completely, I echo that. So thank you.
Courtney, I know you are very busy, and thank you so much for giving us your time. I do have one more quick question, and if anyone else has a quick question, but it was more a comment, but I thought it was very interesting that in Thailand, the palliative care team came in on day one, whereas in the US, we hear stories about palliative care is never even mentioned until a family member asks about it.
It's a very, very good point. Yes, and something that I can't say that's the case for every patient in Thailand, but I worked with some of the palliative care team members while I was there in Thailand, and so I got to know them. And so they came not only in a palliative care specialty to see me, but also as friends and colleagues. But I am absolutely an advocate for palliative care wherever you're at and whatever stage you're at with your journey. I think that they're a fantastic support team. And so if you have, most big hospital systems and clinic systems do offer palliative care in some format, and I absolutely support getting in touch with those people earlier on than later on. I think they can offer a lot that we don't always think about, and they can bring a lot of great sort of healing energy to you as well.
Great, thank you. And I wish it were the case that I think people are sort of shy to bring it up or embarrassed, or they think it's inappropriate or too doom and gloom. But it is, and if we look at it like we're all dying, we should all have palliative care. You know, we should all have good drugs to keep us at least sane every day.
Yeah, you know, life is a terminal illness, and we forget that. So,
Dr. Burnett, when does your book come out?
great question. Thank you. So my book is actually, it comes out for pre-order today. So exciting day, but it won't actually be printed until about beginning of February. So I do have a sort of a promo going on where the first 250 people to pre-order will get a signed copy of the book mailed out to them as soon as it's available. And that link is through my blog. But otherwise it'll be available, you know, on Amazon and at major stores come early February.
Is the book written from a spiritual perspective? Is it about your diagnosis? What's the focus of
Yeah,
the book?
great question. It's a little bit of everything. So it takes you, so what I was talking to you about today are essentially some excerpts from my book. So it tells my story. It takes you back to when basically how I was and how I was living my life prior to going to Thailand, my experience in Thailand, and my experience since then. So it goes through a story of my diagnosis. It incorporates some elements of my spirituality. Some of the quotes that I put in these slides are featured in the book, and sort of how I took those lessons and applied them to my life to cope with my diagnosis. So it's a memoir, a nonfiction, just a story incorporating essentially how cancer was this difficult gift in my life and brought me a lot of happiness.
And I will plug not only your book, Courtney, but your blog, as you mentioned, but you're great on Instagram too. So if anyone's on Instagram, definitely follow Courtney. Fabulous photos. Do you have a professional photographer following you around every week or something?
I have a couple of wonderful friends who are professional photographers, so they have made the whole, they make me look much more glamorous than I am. So
I look at your pictures and I think I haven't even put on lipstick in 6 months, you know. Look at you. Okay, well, anyone else?
For sure.
Okay, well, Courtney, if you need to go, you can go. If you want to hang out, we've just got a few more minutes left. How is everyone else who hasn't spoken? Richard, how are you and Jana doing? Okay. Oh, you're muted.
Sorry. Yeah, we're doing fine. It's wet and muddy in England, and we're in a new lockdown. So our kids, our 20-something kids, have come up and joined us for this next month of lockdown, or part of it. And we've been spending most of our time following your election.
Oh, well, I hope it's been entertaining at least.
Well, but I'm the only one in my family who couldn't vote in it because my wife is originally American and my two kids are, they've all got dual nationality. So they were all doing postal ballots and been following it hour by hour. And
Oh, wow. Yeah, well.
it's been interesting.
Yeah. It's been a distraction, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
So anyone else want to say hello? Tracy, how are, this is, oh, sorry, I should have mentioned, Richard is actually, his wife, Jana Bennett, is a OurBrainBank board member. And this is Tracy Edwards, who is not a patient or carer, but works with cancer patients every day. Tracy, you want to plug your services a little bit?
Sure, I'll be happy to. I am a social worker with the Brain Tumor Network, and we help adults with primary brain tumors. We navigate, help them find brain tumor centers of excellence, second opinions, clinical trials, and then we have two social workers as well, who would one of them being me, who also help with barriers to getting to clinical trials and finding those things, and financial and emotional support. So, and at the beginning of all this quarantine, when you started doing the chats weekly, I was attending weekly. Unfortunately, things have made it so that I can't do that as much. We're not working from home full time anymore, but I'm so glad to be back here. And Hannah, I was actually on, I think the first time that you were on the chat, and you said that you had gone off sugar, and I was so sad for you, but I can't really say anything. but I'm so glad you've decided to try it again.
Well, thank you, because it also was Halloween and I had to have some candy corn.
Yeah.
And yeah. So
Yeah.
I brought the
I
sugar
think,
and
yeah, I think it's important. I guess I think it's important to always maintain big picture thinking as well. And when you're too focused on one thing or a complete elimination of one thing, I just feel like that's never the answer. And maybe I shouldn't say never, but that's a red flag for that being the answer. And so I'm glad that you have decided to incorporate some of that back into your life. And Elizabeth, I just wanted to say what a wonderful advocate you are and seem to be for your mom, and that's impressive. And so shameless plug, I'm actually doing a webinar for the American Brain Tumor Association has a webinar series, and I'm doing their webinar on November 17th. Which will be navigating your medical care. And I took some quotes actually from today that I probably will even incorporate into that, and I'll plug your book, Courtney.
Great.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
That's great, Chase. Could you email me the link for that, and I'll let
Yeah, I absolutely will. There's a registration, and I also put in the presentation, I hope it's okay, I'm going to talk a little bit about the GBM Bill of Rights that you guys did, and I put that in this section with shared decision making, and we're going to talk a lot about that.
That's great. Yeah, getting back to the palliative care issue, is that's one of the rights we call for, that everyone should get information about that early.
Yes, yes.
So, and if anyone, as I mentioned, we are looking. Oh, sorry. Did you want to say something?
And it's just a little thing, but I had a question for Hannah. My mom wears the Optune as well, and I love when you took your hat off. I saw that you've got the open space there with your hair.
Yeah,
did
it's
you
a
buy
halo.
that, or
It's
did you?
called a halo. It's called a halo. Can you hear me? I'm not sure.
Halo. Okay.
Yeah, so I can send you the name of the place where I order it, and it's like 50 bucks. And and I also, so you can see this over here, but this is not. Oh, I think we lost. What happened? My Adobe Flash. Whatever. So this is nice because it doesn't make you as hot. But of course, I do have to wear a hat, and I have a whole bunch of hats. I have another wig that's my whole head, but only when I take a day off a week, just because I want to put that good, really strong hydrocortisone cream on, so that things are good. That's when I do like a full wig, which doesn't have any of this stuff.
Because I've noticed sometimes the full wigs will sometimes cause an alarm on the Optune, but that might be an interesting alternative to have it more open like that. So we may give that a try. So I would love to get where you buy those from.
Okay, so how am let me go get how am I going to get your, hold on, I got to get your text.
Well, why don't you both email me, so and I'll hook you guys.
That would be great. Okay. Thank you. I'll do that. Okay.
And I also wanted to ask if are you interested in the Optune at all?
It's for my mother, Barbara Pope. She's on the.
No, I'm sorry. I'm asking for our speaker.
Oh yeah, great question. Potentially, yes. I will say, so as of now, I'm still finishing up my Temodar, and we're kind of going to make a decision in the next month or so, depending on how that continues to go, since I'm in this gray zone of AA3 versus GBM. So the data is not quite there yet for AA3, so it'll depend on the scans. Yeah.
Well, I hope, Courtney, that that's not a weird thing to say, but I hope you stay at AA3.
But if you decide to use Optune, please tap into us. We've got a lot of experience with it now, and we can offer.
Absolutely, yeah. It seems like a great option if and when it's needed. So.
Yeah.
So
if anyone needs convincing about Optune, just watch the video where they show the two petri dishes side by side, the ones treated and the ones untreated, and it's just that absolutely convinced me when I saw that. Okay, well, I think we're almost done. Thank you.
Something real quick, Martha.
Yeah.
There's also a hat that has a fan in it. It's Cool Breeze. And a couple of I live in Florida, so a couple of our support group patients use that. It has like a built-in fan, the ones that are on Optune.
Great. That's
Anyway,
a good tip.
it sounds weird, but it actually doesn't look that bad.
Yeah, I think it sounds great. Okay, well, thank you again, Courtney. If anyone ever has
Thank you
any
so much,
questions
Courtney.
about Our Brain Bank, you can write me, Martha, at OurBrainBank.org. And well, should we just end on a note of silent meditation just to, should we do that? Okay, everyone close your eyes. Just one deep breath in, hold it, deep breath out your mouth. Okay, I think we should do that now for every meeting. Okay, well, this has been an excellent call. Thank you again, Courtney. Thank you, Courtney's parents, for raising such an amazing, beautiful woman. And this has just been one of our greatest. One last thing I'll say, Hannah, I was very touched that you can talk about your own condition very matter-of-factly, but then you got all choked up when you talked about one of your loved ones. So that's, you should have as much compassion for yourself, although
It comes out, yes.
Okay, all right, well, thank you, everyone.
Martha, and thank you everybody for listening. I appreciate it.
Great, good luck with your
Thank
book
you so much.
party. Are you gonna have a virtual book party or anything?
At some point, yes. So stay tuned.
Definitely. Great. Congratulations. Okay. Bye.
Bye-bye.